Hello, welcome to the West Coast Biased. I'm Andrew Nemec, joined as always by Jason Suke and Nemec. Hey, I didn't need coffee this morning. I do have coffee.
Yeah,
If you listened to Dirt and Sprague this morning, you were delivered quite the scare. Did you catch any of this?
I did not. I have not. I've so far this morning. I've woken up and I've gone on a very cold ass walk with my dog, and that was about the extent of anything I've done this morning. We're taping this at like 8 in the morning, so this is kind of first thing out of the shoot for me.
So I dropped my daughter off, and Sprague's talking on air. And you've done a lot of radio. I've done enough radio to understand that when you stop communicating on the radio because something's going on, something's wrong.
Sure.
And Dirt and Sprague are talking. Sprague goes quiet. They all go quiet.
Yeah.
And Sprague whispers, "There's someone in the building."
Oh.
And yeah.
Oh,
And
that's not good.
there's weirdness in the background, like something's wrong. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
Dirt keeps saying we should go to break. We need to go to break.
Oh.
No, it was bad. They're okay. They're okay.
Yeah.
And then Dirt says, "Well, Swag just left." And so then Dirt leaves. And Sprague is like kind of frozen because he's the only one that realizes kind of they're still on the air.
Yeah.
But he's abandoned the idea that they're doing a radio show.
Huh.
And he said, "Someone's in the building. Bear with us here. We're not real sure what's going on."
Wow.
And then he's like, "Can we please go to break? Can we go to break?" There's no one there to send him to break.
Send him to break.
It goes on for a minute or two. It's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Swag comes back, gets him to break.
Yeah.
So apparently this whole thing evolves over like 10 minutes because they come back, and that's the whole next segment, right? Because something's going on. So apparently someone went in, so there's the main door that you need like a key card.
Yeah.
And then there's the door that used to be the old door in like the, 50s.
Yeah, it's all sealed up. It's like that. It's got a chain on it and stuff.
Okay. Well, somebody got through that chain and got in the building right by the studio.
Wow.
It was apparently later they find out it was somebody that was supposed to be there for vacuuming purposes. But because it's so cold, they were all bundled with a hoodie, pants, so you couldn't see their face or anything. So they came in right by the studio. So they went from doing a show to, because where that door is like very close. You could see it from Rob's seat.
Yeah.
So apparently Sprague sees this guy hooded, all bundled right by the door of the studio, and just kind of chaos ensued for 10 minutes. So it all worked out. The guy's name is Sean. He seems like an okay dude, it sounds like. Wow. But it was weird terrifying on the air if you've ever been in that building, because not to give away secrets, but in a studio, you're in like an air or like a soundproof room. So because of that, there's not a lot of doors. There's not a lot of ways out of a studio. And if someone breaks in and is right by the front door of the studio, you don't really have a lot of options except go through the person standing outside the door.
Yeah.
So luckily it was okay. But it was a very, on the air, it was very frightening because it goes dead and then Sprague goes, "Someone's in the building." Yeah. And then they're trying to coordinate what to do on the air.
Yeah.
It was weird.
Yeah, that's strange. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 plus years, and I don't think we've had anything quite like that. We have at the old building, we had an alarm that would go off if someone had opened the door without like permission. There was an alarm that would go off if someone was in the lobby, and there was once or twice, a handful of times that would go off, but it was usually some sort of misunderstanding, and it happened not frequently, but like I said, once in a while, where I don't think anyone really panicked, but it certainly got our attention. I think me and Rob have had that conversation once or twice, because my back was to the door, but Rob's back was to a window. In the studio now, we don't have windows, but so we haven't had that conversation in this building. We did have it for a while because there was a time or two someone would get loose and say some stuff to you on an email or a text message back in the day, something like that. And Rob was always a little weirded out because there was a big window and his back was to it. And I always, we've had that conversation once or twice about what would happen. So, I mean, look, the world we live in, I mean, I think everyone has had that thought. I've had it dropping kids off at school. I've had it, in restaurants. I've had it on, whether it's on an airplane or whatever, where, you see something and you try not to make any snap judgments. But like you said, sometimes you see someone and they look they just, something looks off, or you get a weird feeling, and instantly you go into that mode of, am I being silly? Because you're silly until you're not. And there's enough of those now where I don't fault anyone for having kind of that thought. So
Yeah,
that's scary stuff.
I mean, not to bring things down, we'll get into college football and
Yeah.
all this stuff. I was out Christmas shopping, and I was at Toys R Us, and we had just been to the mall, or we're headed to the mall, and my mom was at the mall, the Clackamas Town Center. And she said, I was talking to her on the phone, and there was just a really loud bang, and her phone hung up. And I was like, that was weird. You just like, whatever. And it was the time there was the Clackamas shooter, and she ended up being very close to him. She saw him and was able to get away and hide and all that, which is horrible. But it's one of those things where it's a drop call with a loud bang, and I just didn't know. And then she called me back and said, I'm hiding. Don't call me. I'm hiding. And I was like, oh my God. It takes one. It only takes one. And then from then on, you're kind of scarred by it. So my immediate reaction listening was that I went into that mode of like, oh my God, there's somebody in the, because you don't know. So I'm glad they're okay. It ended up being fine. Sean was supposed to be there, it sounds like, but just a really scary moment and a reminder that we probably need to have a plan in place.
Yeah. Again, that Clackamas shooting, I lost a good friend, Steve Forsythe, who is the father of Alex Forsythe, who's now ended up being the starting center for the Broncos because of some injuries, played at Oregon. His mom, Carla, worked with me for, a decade plus. And Steve used to work for us and was a wonderful human being, and, was a friend. And he was, he might've been the only one. There's maybe was one or two others.
Two.
I think there was two, but yeah, he lost his life at that Clackamas shooting. And so we've all had it. It's just, everyone's been touched. And you think back to, like you said, the times you've had, ones where I had one where I kind of chuckled there because I felt stupid. We had a run of school shootings there for a while when I was dropping my kids off, that I just became so overly paranoid that I was dropping my kids off at school, and I saw this kid, and he was in a long kind of trench coat, and he had the hood up, and I don't know, I just didn't like the way he looked. And I was probably paranoid because it was kind of one of those runs where I swear to God, it felt like there was a school shooting every other week. And so I circled back around the block when I left, because he was just standing there. And I don't know why. I just was like, this isn't good. And I didn't want to leave. So I circled back and ended up kind of staring at him. And I just was like, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was like, do I run the kid over? Like if I see something, and I was like, why is he standing there? And I guess he got uncomfortable because I was circling back and staring at him. So I think he thought like I was trying to kidnap him or something. Cause like, I'm not the friendliest looking human being on the planet, especially first thing in the morning. So I'm just like, apparently I freaked that kid out, and that kid was freaking me out. And I ended up laughing about it. Sure, there was a call placed about some idiot circling the parking lot, making a kid uncomfortable. Meanwhile, in my head, I'm terrified that this kid's about ready to go in and shoot up the school. And I don't know, it's just an awful feeling. That just, because it's the reality of where you're at. And I've had enough of those kind of weird confluence of events. I was speaking at Evergreen High School once, and to a class, a listener had asked me to come speak to his class, and the alarm went off while we were in. The little speaker went off and said, shelter in place, not a drill, active shooter. And this is another one that now I can laugh about, and I've told this story, but there's a door to the outside, like, the classroom. A lot of those high schools had doors to every classroom. My car, I could see my car from the classroom. It was like 30 feet away. And I heard active shooter, and I'm like, F this. I was like, seriously, I was like, my car is right there. And the teacher's like, the teacher who invited me to speak is like, we need to turn off lights. We need to sit on the floor. I was like, I need to leave. And the guy's like, please don't. He goes, we have policies in place here. He's like, if you leave, and like the kids. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, dude, I've got an expedition. I can fit 12 people in this car. Let's go. And it just like, it seemed insane to me that, and it turned out there was a kid, had a gun. It was on campus. No one got shot, but he did have one. Someone saw it. So they call and they go in these lockdown procedures. but it just like, to me, it seemed insane. I'm like, my car is right there.
Yeah.
And same thing, like I told my kids, I was like the worst parent. I told my kids, I was like, just run. The idea of, and I don't know there's procedure in place, you can't have gas, but I was like, just run. I'm like, you run until, like, I don't care if you get in trouble. I'm like, you look out the window, and if you don't see anyone there, you freaking run. And so we were in there for maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour, and we just sat on the floor in the complete darkness.
And you had to feel so, I mean, it's fine, but you had to feel so dumb. And that was like, my car is right there. I can leave.
Yeah. Yes. And I'm sitting there, and all I could think about, and they tell you, you're like, don't use your phone. And the kids were using their phones anyways. Right. And so the teachers, like, and like, you couldn't talk, and like, literally, like, the lights are off. It was a surreal moment. And the kids had like done these drills, and I'm like, holy shit, this is what you guys do. So I just sat there, and like, the kids seemed to be pretty cool about the whole thing. I was not.
Yeah.
I was kind of sitting there, and like the guys like locked the door, and I was like, how secure is this? I was like, can he get in? And the teacher's like, well, they're decent doors. And he's like, obviously, and I'm like, oh my God. So like, I went into that whole, like, I put my back right up against kind of the edge of the door. And all I could think about was, dude, if someone goes to open that door, like we're going, like it's on. So I sat there for 45 minutes. My adrenaline was spiked. So I had this weird feeling of, what am I doing here? Leave. I don't care. And then all I could think about was like the newspaper of local radio host leaves kids to die. It was like a Costanza thing. Like, right, it was seriously, but every fiber of my being. And I told my kids this, and they were like, Dad, you always told us to leave. I did. My kids went to a high school where every classroom had an open door to the outside. It was like a California layout, Mountain View High School. And so every classroom had a door to it. And I was like, what? I was like, I just never understood sitting in that classroom waiting. I'm like, no, I told my kids, dude, look out the window. Do you see someone with a gun? No. Then open the door and put as much distance between you and the person trying to shoot you. Get the F out of there. Mm-hmm. And the idea of just sitting in that, and I had to do it. I did. I got social pressure into sitting in that classroom. And I said, luckily no one was hurt, but it was an hour of me feeling like the biggest dumbass, also the biggest coward, adrenaline, and being like, just, like ready. Like, if you hear anything at the door, like, I better have heard it's the police. Otherwise, dude, if I was getting shot, jumping on that son of a bitch. It was a weird time. So anyway, that's a weird way to start this. I didn't know that about Dirt and Sprague. I hadn't heard that this morning. I'm sure I'll go back and listen, but yeah, that's scary stuff.
Yeah, it was creepy. And they admitted, once things calmed down, that they're like, are we going to get shot over a Josh Allen take? And I don't think people realize, and the one little disclaimer I would make, and Lord knows I am not anywhere near celebrity status, but people just from this show and stuff will recognize me in public. It happens to you more because you're a giant man. People will come up and say stuff to you, or God forbid, we both had, and please don't ever do this. Don't come to our houses, but we've had people come to our neighborhood or whatever. Yeah. And it's really jarring when people come up to you. I had somebody when I was with my daughter come up to me and say stuff to me because they were not happy with the take I had. And I'm like, dude, I'm at Safeway with my kid. Like, it's weird. And you very quickly go into kind of protective mode. So be aware of that when you approach people. Like, definitely don't show up at people's houses or neighborhoods or anything like that. Don't show up at the studio. Please.
No, I wouldn't recommend showing up at my house. That's probably not. Don't do that.
It's a bad choice. It's a bad choice. Let's get into happier times. Definitely go back and listen to that, because it was wild. And keep in mind, there's no context. Now you have context. It's much weirder without context. Bet. You're like, what in the world is happening? But they're okay. Indiana wins the college football championship. One of the greatest stories, honestly. I think we get hyperbolic talking about sports all the time. One of the greatest stories in the history of college football. And for all the problems there are in college football, and there are a lot of them, including, both of these teams having to deal with transfers and additions and subtractions right in the middle of this run. They pull off an incredible turnaround and win the title. It's one of the greatest stories, I think, in college football history and maybe sports history. I win Google me to a national title at Indiana in 2 years.
It is. And I'm not one to speak, and I try not to do a recency bias thing. I tend to be pretty level-headed. I'm not a hot takey guy. It's the greatest story in college football history. It's the greatest story that I've ever covered in my 20 plus years of doing this. It's Miracle on Ice stuff. I'm a big Miracle on Ice guy. I was too little to fully appreciate it, but I have a signed photo right here on the other side of all the players. I've gotten to meet some of those guys, and I tell people all the time, like, there's just not another story like that. And you can probably go back and, find something from the 1930s and, some, amateur Bobby Jones sort of thing. But in modern sports, I usually take modern sports as kind of like the 1970s ish on, color barriers broken, somewhat modern training technique. So, let's go to me. Yeah. Roughly, 1970s. Miracle on Ice to me has always been the greatest story. I don't know if this is Miracle on Ice. It certainly is close. I always say the Miracle on Ice. I mean, it's not even the best college players, but a group of college kids beat the greatest team maybe ever assembled. And you have a school that was the second losingest program in the history of college football. I think Northwestern has one more than they do. They hadn't won a bowl game since what was it, like the Copper Bowl, I think, in the 90s. I mean, it was, I can't begin to describe how irrelevant Indiana was. And Curt Cignetti, who was claimed to fame at that point, was the wide receivers coach at Alabama 10 years ago. He comes in and says that Ohio State sucks, that Michigan sucks, gets tired of answering questions about who he is. Like you said, says, I win, Google me, and then proceeds to win 11 games, get made fun of for losing in the college football playoff. Colin Cowherd says that Indiana should never be allowed back in the playoff. They go into the season and dumbasses like me say, I don't believe it. I think Indiana will be fine. Maybe they make the playoff again, but whatever. And all they do is go undefeated and then in a streak beat Ohio State, Ohio State, Alabama, Oregon, Miami. And by the way, some of those resounding victories. Beat Ohio State in a gutsy win, absolutely house Alabama and make Alabama quit, embarrass Oregon, and then are just a better team than Miami. And again, pull out a gutsy win. I've never seen anything like it. If someone could find me a story, and I don't even care about college sports, find me a story in the NFL, find me a story in Major League Baseball, find me a story in hockey. This would be like if I'm trying to think, like if the Washington Wizards won an NBA title this year. This isn't the Portland Trailblazers, right? It was like this is like an irrelevant team. If the Pittsburgh Pirates win the World Series, that doesn't happen. This can't happen in pro sports. It can't. It doesn't. They're just the talent gap that exists when you look at the amount of players that are assembled here and what they've done in 2 years. It's the greatest coaching job. It's the greatest story. I've never seen anything like it. I think we're doing a disservice when we're kind of like, oh yeah, it's a great story. I've never seen anything like it. No, this is, and it ends a chapter. It ends 100 years of college football. And this officially ushers in whatever world we're living in now, whatever you want to call this, the post, payment world or whatever. This is the official turning of the page. That the old guard is over, and it shows schools what you're capable of. And yes, you can give me the Mark Cuban, and they have money. It's a big university, and so the idea that this can happen everywhere, no, it can't. It probably can't, because even Indiana, for all of their limitations, it's still I think the largest university in the country. It's the largest fan base. They have like 80,000 people that are enrolled in that thing. It's the largest alumni base. They do have money. They got a guy in Mark Cuban that was willing to step up. And before that, there was a robust fund. So, there was still some infrastructure there that allowed them to tap into. Obviously, you can't go to a place like, I'm trying to think like Tulsa or something, some group of five or whatever. But the fact that an irrelevant school for 100 years managed to do this, I don't know if everyone can do it, but it puts anyone with a pulse and says, yes, you can do this with the right guy and administration that's willing to commit and not in, Oregon's been trying to build something for 30 years. They've really been trying to build something. Kansas over the last 15 years has dumped a bunch of resources into it. Rutgers has tried a couple times and spinning their tires. And yet a school did it in 2 years. it's, again, if you can't tell in my voice, I love this story. I love Curt Cignetti. I love what this means for college football. And if you wrote this script and made a movie about it, I would laugh at you and say, this is cheesy and dumb, and this could never happen. And it just did in real life. So I mean, incredible.
It's an amazing story. I mean, it really is. And I mean, I think you hit every point there. I started to say earlier, and then I wanted to give you the floor because I know how you feel about this Indiana team. For all the problems in college football, this is the good side of how things have changed. That a car dealership in rural Birmingham is not the X factor for college football. And for anyone who wants to say, and Saban does this, and I wish he wouldn't, like kind of, he almost implies that now it's impure. And before it was more righteous, they won more authentically. They found a way to cheat in the SEC all the way up to the officials kind of turning a blind eye, not kind of, completely turning a blind eye to players getting paid. Yeah. I covered recruiting before pre-NIL and was told that they have essentially a salary cap for their current roster to keep kids and a salary cap for their recruiting classes. They were doing this before it was legal.
Yeah.
And they had an infrastructure that said, this is worth so much money for us if we just cheat, that we'll make millions upon millions to literal billions of dollars, if you count the TV deals, for our conference, if we just turn a blind eye to this, and all we have to do is pay these 5-star kids like $250,000. Yeah. Like, if everyone learns about this, we're going to have to pay a whole bunch of money. Let's just cheat. And I know that's true because there were coaches that came from there to the Pac-12 and expressed behind the scenes literal outrage. How do you expect me to win against those schools if you're not willing to cheat? Where's the budget to pay players? Where's the budget to keep my roster? What are you guys doing? How far behind are you? And that was the sentiment from coaches who left that conference to go to the Pac-12. And then you had the USCs and Washingtons of the world, when NIL was legal, had to learn how to do it. And because they didn't hire from SEC land to start, they didn't have anybody in-house to say, here's how this works. Yeah. And so for college football to evolve to where it is now, yes, there's a lot of bad things, but it's not impure. And it does lead you to, if you're willing to spend, if you have the resources, if you make the right hires, you can go from irrelevant to national champion very quickly. And that is one really positive thing about the new era of college football. That is one thing about college football now that I cherish. It's not just going to be Alabama and Georgia and Clemson every year. Hire the right guy, invest, and you have a chance to get to the top of the mountain. And forever from now on, we can say, you know how I know? Because Indiana did it. And that's a really, really exciting thing. Because if we were drafting teams 10 years ago and we split it up and said, we're trying to get national championships, in all seriousness, in all of the Power Five, Indiana, Vanderbilt, last two picks, Vanderbilt because they're in the SEC, Indiana because they're the most irrelevant team in the Big Ten for 100 years. Those would be the last two picks. And Indiana got to the top of the mountain. It's incredible. Mendoza in this game, I talked about the fact that he wasn't really a big time Heisman winner. He's one of the he's one of the lower tier best player on best team. I still kind of feel that. But from an execution standpoint, from a delivering in a big moment, he had his Heisman moment, his big moment on that 4th and 4, 12-yard touchdown run, took an absolute beating, broke multiple tackles and got into the end zone. I wish that would have happened in like a Big Ten title game, so that could have been his Heisman moment. He got it in the national title. His interviews are weird. He's kind of a weird cat, but really cool to see them win a title. I thought that was a great game. And to Miami's credit, this Indiana team doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And once they get ahead of you, they just sort of squeeze you like a boa constrictor. The fact that Miami was able to bounce back as many times as they did, in where you go, they're done. They're knocked down. And they got back up and found a way to score. They played 2 to 3 times better than I thought they could. If you'd have told me block, punt, touchdown, Indiana scores first, all of those things are going to happen, I'd have said, okay, Miami lost like Oregon. But they rallied. They didn't, and their D-line and their front seven played Texas Tech plus, and Ruben Bain is special. They have a special group. Those are all the things. I know I'm rambling, but had a lot of fun with that championship game, and a whole lot stands out to me, really.
Sure. I mean, I thought too, like halfway through that game, it was actually into the third quarter, that Miami's entire offense was that one Fletcher run. That was it. And I kind of sat there and I was like, oh, this is, this is cute. But, outside of that, they've done nothing. And you're like, all right, this is, the dam's going to burst here. And I think Indiana kind of played it that way too, because they couldn't block Miami's front. So it felt like Indiana just kind of went to, we're not going to do anything to screw this up. We can't block their guys. So no big deal. We're just going to play defense. We'll run the ball and we'll bleed the clock, and eventually we'll get a play. And then, again, I'm not a Carson Beck guy. I think for what they paid him, I was like, dude, what are they getting? But Carson Beck in this playoff, he's made enough plays kind of where you're kind of like, okay, all right. And that one against Ole Miss where he drove down, you're like, give the guy credit. And he did that. They started making some plays and they started breaking some tackles, and they answered. They answered the bell a couple of times. And yes, it was largely based on their run game, but Carson Beck made plays and got Malachi Toney the ball and was throwing the ball downfield. And I give him a lot of credit, because I thought there were multiple times, especially after the block punt, that Miami was cooked, and they responded to. Even after the Mendoza touchdown, what did Miami do? They went down and they made that a game. And so, yeah, my hat's off, because I really thought Miami was going to be cooked there multiple times, and they were not. I also thought that it was weird. So when Cignetti went for it on the fourth down with the Mendoza run, which again shows you that that they weren't throwing the ball very well in that game, because again that they couldn't protect. But the amount of times that they got big third down conversions running the ball, and so when they did that quarterback draw, I guess that was an RPO, and it's kind of a fun story. He said that if it was this look, it was going to throw the ball. If it was that look, it was man or zone. Then he was going to run it. And he said one side of the field was zone, one of it was man. So he said, F it, I'm just going to run it, see what happens. And dude, what a play, dude. That thing was awesome. And then when they got down again, when they kicked the field to go up 6, it was 4th and 5. I was really surprised. I thought he was going to go for it. And because to me, you're in that moment, there's 2 minutes and some change left. And I was like, what are you doing here? If you get this, the game's over. If you kick a field goal and you go up 6, I did not understand that at all. I really thought that Miami was go down and score and win that game. I thought it was a huge mistake on the part of Cignetti to kick that field goal, because a touchdown beats you either way. I mean, if you don't convert that, okay, a field goal ties, a touchdown beats you. If you kick the field goal, a touchdown beats you. And there was plenty of time in college football. You don't need timeouts. When you have a minute and some change, and with the way the clock runs and stops on first downs, I sat there when they kicked that field goal. I was like, oh boy. I'm like, this is setting yourself up for absolute heartbreak. You have been the better team this entire season. You've been the better team this entire game. And all Miami needs is one fluky play. And they got down there within striking distance. And I was like, holy God. I'm like, this is going to come back to haunt Indiana, that they did not go for it there. You went for it on 4th down to try to end the game, and it didn't end up ending it, even though you got it, and you decided to kick a field goal. That just made no sense to me. And then, unfortunately, I don't mean to be mean, but then the real Carson Beck showed up, which is why I'm just not a Carson Beck guy. In that moment, this is why I never thought Carson, he's not an NFL quarterback. I didn't think he was a big-time college quarterback. I just didn't have any faith in him, and it sucks for Miami, but he threw the Caleb Williams, what are you doing? You can't throw that ball in that situation. The Indiana was in a cover 2 look, and they're always in a cover 2 look, and the guys running the vertical, and they had no one there to hold the corner. So if in a cover 2, right, the corner sits. Corner carries the guy for 10 to 12 yards and then passes him off to the safety over the top. Well, if there's no one underneath for that corner to sit on, I think Richard Sherman I think tweeted something about this too. I think it was Richard Sherman, where he said, dude, that's just a phenomenal play. He goes, when there's nothing for that corner to sit on, you keep trailing. You trails, and now you've bracketed. Yeah, you've bracketed, right? And you're on both sides. And there was no one. There wasn't another receiver on that side of the field. So I don't know if that's just weird play design or if it was just the way it worked out in cover two. That's a bad look. And I know you're in a hurry up offense, but I mean, Indiana's in cover two for most of the time. That's just, they play that too high shell look. And so when there was no one there, the corner just kept going and going and going and kind of sinking on that. And then Carson Beck threw that. Not only threw it, but he threw it shallow. I mean, it's just, that's what, I mean, honestly, again, not to kill a kid, but he's like, it's been there for like 100 years. You can't make that throw. You can't. I understand you see cover two, you see over the top. You have to understand, for a veteran player, that is a throw that is inexcusable. And he will go back and watch that for the rest of his life. And he will say, what were you doing there? And it's also one as a player, when you watch film, and God knows I've had 100 of these, because it's easy for my dumbass to sit here after the fact. And when I see the all 22 in the aerial and be like, oh, what are you doing throwing the ball? I've been in those situations where on film, they'll say, why did you do this? And you won't have an answer. You'll see it clear as day. And you'll be like, I don't know. There's just not a reason to throw that ball. So great play by Indiana, but an inexcusable throw on the part of Carson Beck. And that's funny how these games usually go when you have two teams kind of swinging back and forth and all the momentum shifts. I think, Signetti said it. We made one more play than they did. And that's true. Indiana was the better team. They let Miami hang around. Miami kind of kept fighting and clawing. I thought they got the benefit of some really loose officiating where they were allowed to do some stuff, which, give them credit. They just let them play most of the game. And Miami just wasn't going to quit. So hats off to Cristobal's team. I think it's kind of I don't know if it's a likable team, but they play with an edge and they didn't quit. There were plenty of times there where I thought Miami was going to roll over and die, and they did not. But you can't make enough of those mistakes. And that was, again, it's an absolute killer in that situation. And it led to the greatest story in college football, as opposed to what could have been, which was, it was close. You're one throw away.
Never a good sign when I make a joke about a punch being thrown to you in pregame that somebody would throw a punch, and then someone from that team did throw a punch. Mark Fletcher punched an Indiana player after the game.
Yeah. And kudos to the Indiana player. And I don't know what was said, but good for the Indiana player for walking away, because that could have been an ugly scene.
He just backed away. Yeah.
He just backed up, and it's easy to do when you're winning and you're laughing. But you throw that punch, and next thing you know, the Indiana guy throws one back, and now we got you got chaos on the field. And so, I just that's inexcusable. Get off the field. And I guess Fletcher's a good kid. I don't know him. I know a lot about him, but a lot of people are saying that he's a good dude and all that, but I don't know. That's Bush League, and I think it reflects poorly on Mario Cristobal and the whole swagger and Michael Irvin and hitting guys late and kind of being dirty. It's a bad look. You look like a bunch of bitches. And I wasn't a fan.
Why was Michael Irvin? So listen, 1 minute of fun police here.
Yeah.
Michael Irvin is not a coach.
No.
He was between the 20s
talking to players,
coaching players. He's mic'd. So he's telling them things to do.
Yeah.
That's definitely against the rules. And again, I don't want to be the fun police. Congrats to Indiana. I thought Miami played really well, but Miami has a little bit, and this is what I always worried about a little with Cristobal. And this is why I think, they conducted themselves really, really well for most of that game in terms of just getting to the championship game. They fought. But the knock on Mario is, one, very vanilla X's and O's scheme. I thought they did a great job in this game. And then the other thing is his teams have lacked discipline. And Miami's the wrong place if you're a coach that kind of lacks discipline to make championship runs, because you're going to have the sideshow. And Michael Irvin, I'm not the biggest Michael Irvin fan in the world. Let's put it that way. But he should not be coaching play. It's against the rules. And they kind of allowed the circus to extend onto their sideline, and then a punch is thrown after the game. And I thought that was really disappointing. And if you paid any attention to the history of Miami, I hate that they've been nicknamed convicts, and it's the Catholics versus convicts. And there's clearly racial undertones to that. The flip side of it is, if you want that to go away, you have to conduct yourself in a different manner. And it's not their fault that they've been labeled, like they were labeled convicts. And again, that's not what I'm saying here. But if that's your reputation, you can't be the team that throws punches and have the dude that seems yeeted out of his mind coaching your players on the sideline. It's just it was a very strange look from a Miami team that I thought was starting to buck some of that, to be honest.
Yeah. It's not. It's not the best. It's well said or well put. They want to embrace that, and clearly Cristobal is. I mean, he's friends with Irvin, and he said that he loves his energy and what he brings and all that. And Ed Reed was down there and Ray Lewis, and it just kind of feels like Cristobal wants to bring back those days. And I get it. That was the heyday. That's when he played there, and Cristobal has some of that too. I mean, Cristobal. I don't. It's be careful the way what I say here. It covered him in Oregon. The guy knows how to build a program, and the guy recruits well.
Wow, you really pivoted for what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to tell a story. I have a story of him trying to strong arm some of his players into returning when they wanted to go to the draft, and how uncomfortable some of those situations got. There were also rumors, or at least a rumor of a physical altercation between
another
Cristobal
coach
and another coach.
Yeah.
So there's been some weird stuff.
He's a bully. He just is.
Yes.
He was a bully when he played. He's a bully now. And I'm not saying he's a bad guy, and I'm not saying he's a bad coach. He just clearly embraces that this is the 80s and the 90s and bringing back those canes. And the fact that he's got former players on the sidelines on all fours, barking and whipping things and talking to players, it does seem a little chaotic. And the idea that his teams melt down and that he's doesn't make the best decisions in clutch moments, and a player hits someone after the game. I'm not going to say it's on brand. It's on brand for Miami. How about that?
It is.
This is like we all, stereotypes and brands and all that stuff. Like, some of it's unfair and some of it is deserved, right? Like, if you're around someone enough and you say, hey, that guy kind of seems like an ass, yeah, sure, he can be misunderstood. And maybe if you got to know him a little bit better, I've heard that about like Chip Kelly, right? I wasn't a big Chip guy when he was here, but I heard from people who's like, hey, if you get him away from football, blah, blah, blah. He's a really cool guy. And I've actually, over the years, I've actually gotten to know him a little bit more, and I can see that side. I think he softened a little bit. But when he was here at Oregon, we covered him. Dude, the guy was an asshole. There's no other way to put it. And I had a dozen instances with that guy where he was an ass to me. He was an ass to a bunch of people. And he started to be an ass to me when I called him out for being an ass to a national reporter. I saw him blow off an interview that he had to do with ESPN for the Rose Bowl. He blew it off and told the lady, I'm not doing this crap. And they had to go drag him back and be like, yes, you are. You're contractually obligated to do it. And we talked about it on the air because I just happened to be there, and I didn't fillet him or whatever. But I remember seeing that and being like, I said, that's the difference between Chip Kelly, who's never been here before, and Jim Tressel. I think Tressel understands kind of how the game works a little bit, and Chip's new to it all. And he took that so personally, and that dude would mother F me at every chance I get. And I've got so many. I drove down to Eugene once because we were going to try to clear the air, and he said to come down, and I drove down, and he was in the building, but then said he wouldn't meet with me. And, the dude was just, that whatever his reputation was at Oregon of being an ass, it was well-deserved.
Yes.
Like, yes, can you be misunderstood? Sure. But when you have a reputation, usually that reputation is pretty well-deserved. And so whatever people think of Cristobal, I'm telling you, it's well-deserved. Are there people that will swear by that guy? And can he, show signs of kindness and all that when you get close to him? And, do some of his players love him? Absolutely. But trust me, everything you think when you look at Mario Cristobal and you say, boy, I bet that guy is this, that, and the other, it's for the most part well warranted.
You nailed it. You nailed it. Bully.
He's a bully.
There are people very close to him within his program who would say bully. The former players who would say he bullied players. I mean, it was not good. This is not where I wanted to go with the Nat, because Miami conducted themselves largely really well. But I think it does a disservice to the game to not mention like 2 or 3 late hits on Mendoza early. You can't tell me that wasn't intentional or that was discussed. to just rattle him.
They went out with the idea of we are going to punish him,
even if we take a few penalties.
Even if we take a few penalties, and I've been on teams where that is said, where no one comes out and says, "Hey, get penalties," but it's like one of those, "Hey, we're going to hit him, and guys, we play on an edge, and if something happens, don't worry about it. We'll deal with it."
And then you've got Mark Fletcher throwing a punch after the game, Michael Irvin, just his antics, and Ray Lewis on the sideline. And if you don't know Ray Lewis, you can Google him and you'll find out he should not be the face of your universe. I mean, there was just a little bit of ickiness to it, just a little bit that rubbed me the wrong way. Want to transition a little bit. Oregon hits the transfer portal, gets a number of players, and they officially hire an offensive and defensive coordinator. And I'm really alarmed. I'm using the word properly. I think Chris Hampton has a great reputation as a potential defensive coordinator. And when your head coach is a defensive-minded guy, that's a little less important. And I think Hampton would do a great job anyway.
Yeah.
On the offensive side of the ball, based on the transfer portal, based on Dante coming back, you are all in, all your chips in. I've heard from sources that this offseason money is not an issue, that people think that Oregon has unlimited funds, and that's not true. If there was ever going to be a year where they just spent just to like, hey, we're Ohio State this year, we're Indiana this year, we're pushing all our chips in to win it this year, this is the year they're doing that. Promoting Drew Mehringer is alarming to me. That's a really important job, and I think there's no other more important job on a coaching staff than the coordinator opposite what your head coach specializes in. If he's an offensive coach, your defensive coordinator is your most important. If your coach is a defensive-minded coach, your offensive coordinator is the most important. You have to get that hire right. Mehringer's called plays one time in his career. It was in 2016 at Rutgers. They were last in all of college football in points scored. And talked to a folk who charted him and said, essentially, the play calling, it wasn't just that they couldn't score. The play calling was like out of whack. Like it was just nonsensical stuff. That's really alarming when you're all in. And it doesn't mean he won't be a good coach, but when you're all in everywhere, if he ends up being the play caller, and I still think there's a possibility they bring in a quarterback guy who calls plays, but then why promote Mehringer? Mm-hmm. I think it's Dan Lanning's first big mistake. You can't be all in and then go, and we'll kind of give it up to a guy to call plays who hasn't called plays in a decade. I find that alarming. Am I overstating that?
No. It's just it seems odd that on a year where you are all in, and that's the same thing I've heard multiple times, that Texas is doing this, LSU is certainly doing this, Notre Dame, Oregon, that this is, you're spending more money than you normally would. I mean, to keep this roster together for Oregon, this was an extremely expensive roster. This will be, and I don't know if this will be the norm going forward. I'm guessing this is, it will fluctuate a little bit, but this will be one of the most expensive rosters ever put together in college football history. No one will have a more expensive roster this year. I think them in Texas and Notre Dame, supposedly with revenue sharing, it's going to be a big number. So it does seem odd that when you're going all in and everything's coming back, and the way I kind of put it was, in this day and age, we don't really have a lot of key positions that kind of grow and develop, right? Like if Dante Moore weren't to come back, they weren't going to promote Austin Novosad or Brock Thomas, right? You were going to go out and get someone that's already played, and they did. They went out and got Raiola. Just like, before that, they went out and they got Bo Nix, and they went out and got Dylan Gabriel. Like they've shown you here that in important positions, they are not going to sit on their hands and say, well, we think we've got a guy that's going to grow in the program, and showed that with the O-line last year, right? Hey, we got some holes to fill. Cool. We're going to go out and get proven O linemen. And they did it this year. Like it's, hey, Finneman's leaving. What do? Oh, there's young safeties there. McNutt. Nah, we're going to go get someone from Minnesota. We're going to go get the best safety in the portal. So it is a little odd to me. And I always preface this by saying I'm always careful about when I'm calling out plays or anything. I'm not in meetings. I'm not inside that coaching room. I don't know what the reputation is in there. I don't. But from an outsider's perspective, it seems weird in a program that is not right now set on growth and development, at least at marquee positions, right? It is, we're going to go out and find someone to fill this spot. And then again, if there's competition and the young guys play, see the running backs, then they play. But, Mekhi Hughes was brought in, again, one of the best backs in the portal. Oh, cool, right? We got better backs than him. Cool, you're not going to play. So it seems odd to me that at what I think is the second most important position in all of your team, which is your play caller, on an offense that was a little wonky this year against the better competition, you scored about 18.5 points a game, and you bring everyone back. All your receivers are back, basically. You lost a tight end, but you have another really good one and a freshman that you love and a 5-star kid from Penn State. All your backs, your quarterback, all that. It just seems weird to me. Seems weird that you're like, well, we're going to take a guy who's not really done this before, and when he did do it, he was really bad at it, and we're just going to hand it over to him. That seems strange. Short-sighted, narrow-minded. I mean, again, I don't know, because maybe inside the room, this guy's a rock star, and maybe it's like, oh my God, this guy's going to be the next great thing. Maybe this is, Marcus Mariota, that no one really knows about. And people are like, why did Darren Thomas leave? Because he knew Marcus was coming down the tracks. So maybe this was Will Stein had to go because Will Stein was about ready to get pushed out. I don't know. It just seems odd. It seems really, really odd, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Again, way more so than the defense. This seems like a hire that will be a risky move, because if you don't get where you're going, where you want to be next year, and the offense is a little clunky, you're going to point to something. And my guess is that this will be something that will be scrutinized over the offseason and throughout the course of this year. I mean, shoot, Will Stein was criticized multiple times. And I think Will Stein was a really good OC. So gutsy move. We'll see how it plays out. Again, no one knows when you make these hires how it goes, but that's, if you had to pick one thing about Oregon next year that scares you, it's nothing on the field. I think it's as talented a roster as anyone in college football. It's as deep a roster as anyone in college football. You're going to be a preseason top 3. Feel pretty confident about that. And you've lost 3 games over the last 2 years, all 3 of those games to the eventual national title. Everyone's coming back. The money's there. The roster's there. There's no excuses. To me, it's national title or bust. And, you have 2 guys that have never really done this before that are taking over at coordinators. So in Lanning, you trust if you're a Duck, and we'll see how this goes. But that appears right now to be the big question mark for Oregon in the next season, is both coordinators, especially on the offensive side of the ball.
To me, it's an F1 car, because it can't be NASCAR because those are stock. It has to be that you souped up an F1 car like crazy. Because, again, you can invest as much as you want in those. You can break any rules, right? As I understand it, not break any rules, but you can do whatever you want to those cars. So you've spent more than anyone else in the F1 series, and you put a driver who's been great in the simulator, but he's never driven before, and it's the race. Yeah. And it's like, you didn't have to make this race his first race. You didn't have to. So I think it's I think it's alarming, and we'll see. Maybe there's another hire coming to work with those quarterbacks. I can't imagine you have both Dante Moore and Dylan Raiola without a veteran quarterback coach. I do think Dante Moore needs a little bit of a kick in the butt. I thought his body language was iffy at times this year. He was more, when he got hit in the mouth, he was more pouty than he was going to bow up and really deliver. And it showed to me in the semifinal game. It showed itself in the Indiana game. It showed itself in some of the games that they won, that they squeaked out, that he kind of just looked kind of pouty behind his offensive line at times. I think he needs a guy to say, yeah, you're special, but you're not that special. You're not more special than football. And we need to toughen you up a little bit. And we need you to be more of a vocal leader. And he needs to have all that. And it obviously didn't come from, or it didn't present itself through a season this year. So I think you need an outside guy with a lot of clout to develop those guys and to develop Raiola, because you're doing him, I don't want to say disservice, him sitting out a year, which he chose to do, to be Dante Moore's backup. You'd think they'd want a real guru to continue to develop both of those guys, because you're sitting on 2 winning lottery tickets, and you want to make sure that those guys continue to get developed. Dan Lanning's a great coach. He knows more about football than I could ever begin to know. So I give him tremendous credit in that regard. They're 48-8. His last few losses have only been to national championship teams, all of that, yada, yada. Great coach, great recruiter. But I do think it's also fair to say if you've got the all-time roster for Oregon and that's what you're trying to compile, probably you want a play caller who has called plays in the last decade.
Yeah.
And done a good job of it. So
again, we shall see. This is one of those things where whenever these hires are made, and I'll even say this about head coaches, right? I mean, how many people when Indiana hired Kurt Cignetti were like, who the hell is this? Or when, NFL's got all these head coaches that are being hired right now. And like, we laud John Harbaugh. Oh, John Harbaugh to the Giants. It's a can't miss. Can it? I want to say it was 2022. There were 9 openings in the NFL. I believe 8 of them have already been fired. I think there's 1 that's still hanging around. So, we can love hires. We can hate hires. Same thing with draft picks. The only way to know is by letting it play out. I'll just say that, I guess that's why I always try to preface it. I say the 30,000 foot view. From a 30,000 foot view, this seems, the F1 analogy is a good analogy. It just seems odd. You have unlimited resources. You have as many resources as anyone else, right? And you've got a guy like Kwiatkowski, the defensive coordinator at Texas, that has moved on, that everywhere that guy goes, he puts together top 10 defenses. It's just odd that there's, like he's sitting out there and you're promoting a guy from within that's done it he's had 1 decent year at Tulane. But again, maybe, inside closed doors, you think that guy's great and you've seen him, and Lanning's more of a defensive guy. But, the idea that you can't go poach, I mean, you poach quarterbacks, you poach linemen, you can't go get someone who is a really, really bright offensive mind that you look and be like, hey, I really like what they do. They're down at New Mexico or down at Memphis or something. And hey, this is similar to what we do here. And dude, that guy's just really sharp. All right, well, let's bring him in and kind of mesh what we do with what he does and make sure the terminology stays the same. And, you can bring in an offensive guy and have him married to your system. Like anytime someone came into Alabama, that was still Nick Saban's defense. And then like you put your own spin on it. So again, I mean, maybe we're beating a dead horse here. I think we both agree that that will be what to keep an eye on. And we got a long way to go until you get to the season, but that will be something that everyone will, I think it's the number one storyline going into next year with Oregon. Because what else are you going to pick apart? Like, I don't know. You bring back most of the meaningful receivers that you have. You have plenty of tight end depth. All your running backs, your O-line should be pretty solid, and you like the young guys that you have there too. You add some guys in the portal. You got maybe the number 1 pick in the NFL draft coming back next year. Your entire defensive line came back. Your entire secondary was young, except for the one guy you lost, and you replaced him with a clone. All you really need is to find one linebacker. My God. I mean, seriously, that's what the biggest question mark is. Maybe you find like a right guard, and can you find a middle linebacker? That's the only question you have. And so, what the only thing you can point to is coaching, right? And it's interesting because the last couple of times that they have lost, and even go back to those games they lost against Washington, what do most of the people say? That it's a coaching thing. Kind of same thing that Cristobal had to deal with. Like it's a scheme thing. It's a coaching thing. So, you either have a chance to put that to rest and put together a team that's so talented that they just overwhelm people, or the coaching acumen has to show up in the big moments. So again, we'll see next year when it shows up in the big moments or it doesn't show up in the big moments. But just that's my only, to me, Oregon's a top 3 team. I wouldn't shock me. Texas will probably be number 1 because they're saying the same things down in Texas with Arch Manning. So to me, it's Texas 1, Oregon 2, or flip it, whatever you want. And now go out and prove it. Sark's got something to prove and Lanning's got something to prove, because they both kind of have the same sort of criticism that comes their way, even though Sark's made it, a game further.
We got to wrap there because I have to jet for a meeting. Let's do another one of these this week and break down some NFL action. I also want to do, now that we're a little bit removed from Oregon's loss to Indiana, we saw the national championship game, and Duck fans are a little calmer, a sort of recap on the season and just how we feel about Oregon's season as a whole and where we're looking forward to them next year. We obviously highlighted some of the questions in this one, not necessarily a positive spin, but just take a look at where we see strengths for next year's team. And I'm just gonna kind of give people a hint here. One of the strengths is going to be Dante Moore. I know that sounds crazy, but you'd be surprised how many Oregon fans thought Dylan Raiola, thank God we can get rid of Dante Moore. you should watch more Nebraska games, because if you think Dante Moore makes mistakes, part of the problem with Dylan Raiola is a lot of mistakes. He needs to clean up a lot of things, and it might be good for him to sit out a year because he's developed some bad habits in that Nebraska offense. So Dante Moore is going to be a strength, folks, and if that's a problem for you, you need to reconfigure your hot takes regarding football. Suke, thank you. Really appreciate you. And we'll be back again later this week. Subscribe wherever, like, review, the whole thing.